She told me it was just a temporary job, just helping out, she said. I didn't expect to be called family. I didn't expect my name to be read first in a room full of Whitmores. It started on a Tuesday. I remember because I'd just paid my phone bill with the last of my savings and skipped lunch again. I was sitting on the edge of my twin bed in my one-bedroom apartment when my phone buzzed. Unknown number. Normally I wouldn't answer, but hunger does funny things to pride. Hello? My voice cracked a little. Is this Miss Carter? A voice asked, calm and clipped, like someone who'd never had to rush in their life. Speaking. This is Eleanor Whitmore. I was given your name by someone I trust. I need a personal assistant. It's a temporary position, just helping out around the house. Nothing complicated. That name, Whitmore, it hit me like static. Everyone in this state knows the Whitmore name. Eleanor was the widow of Vincent Whitmore, founder of Whitmore Steel. She lived in that massive brick estate on the hill where the hedges were shaped like swans. People said the family was cursed, or at least cursed with too much money and not enough love. I said yes before I even asked about the pay. She sent a driver that same evening, a man in a charcoal suit who barely spoke. The ride was quiet, my mind racing the whole way. What did she want with someone like me? No connections, no pedigree, just a stack of rejection letters and a worn-out laptop. When we pulled up to the mansion, I half expected to be turned away. The place was even more intimidating up close. Stone lions at the gate, vines curling like fingers around the pillars. The air smelled like roses and secrets. Eleanor met me at the door herself. She was smaller than I imagined, thin, wrapped in a silk shawl, but her eyes, those eyes were sharp as broken glass. She studied me without smiling, then stepped aside. "You're younger than I expected," she said, leading me through a grand hallway lined with portraits. "That may be a good thing." I didn't know what to say, so I just nodded and followed. She gave me a tour, library, kitchen, sunroom, her private office, even a greenhouse. Her steps were deliberate. Her voice never rose above a whisper. She didn't explain much, just pointed and kept moving. It felt like she was measuring me, not the other way around. That first night, she didn't assign me anything, just told me to rest in the guest quarters and be ready by 8 the next morning. I barely slept. The bed was too soft, the silence too loud. By morning, I was sure I'd dreamed the whole thing. But at 7:59, I was standing outside her study, heart thudding. She opened the door without a word and handed me a list. Groceries, phone calls to return. A small note that said, "Do not let Martin handle the papers." I didn't ask who Martin was. I figured I'd find out soon enough. And I did. At precisely noon, a man in a tailored navy suit barged into the study without knocking, tall, grey at the temples, and wearing a scowl like it was tailored to fit. "Mother," he said, ignoring me, "you've got 3 missed calls and a lawsuit pending." She waved him off. "Speak to Miss Carter. She's handling those matters now." His eyes snapped to me, narrowing. "She's what?" "She's helping out," Eleanor said with finality. I should have looked away, but I didn't. Something about his tone made my stomach twist. He stared at me like I was mold growing on marble. Later that day, I met Lena, his daughter. Blonde, tan, expensive from head to toe. She asked if I was the maid. I told her no, I was assisting her grandmother. She laughed like it was a punchline. "You won't last the week," she said. That night, I sat in the garden, watching the sun drop behind the trees. Carlos, the gardener, nodded as he passed. He didn't speak much, but he had kind eyes. "Will you stay quiet?" he said. "You'll learn more that way." I didn't know what he meant. Not yet. But I was beginning to understand this wasn't just a job. It was a test, a maze with no map. If you're just as curious as I was walking into that mansion, make sure to subscribe now so you don't miss the twists coming next. Things are about to get a lot more complicated. The mornings came early at the Whitmore estate. By 6:30, sunlight was already filtering through the stained glass panels in the hallway, casting colored ribbons across the marble floors. I walked in silence, my footsteps muffled by the thick rugs, clutching my task list for the day. Most of it was mundane: organize the storage room, call the pharmacist for Eleanor's prescription, pick up a rare blend of tea only sold at a boutique 20 miles out. Nothing felt accidental. Every task required precision, patience, or loyalty. The mansion itself felt like a character, alive, watching. Each room held a sense of preserved history, as if the walls remembered every argument, every whisper. I began to learn which doors creaked, which steps squeaked, which rooms were kept locked. One door at the end of the east wing had a keypad. I never saw anyone use it. I never asked. On the third morning, Martin found me dusting the bookshelves in the library. "Still here," he muttered. I straightened. "Good morning, Mr. Whitmore." He didn't return the greeting, just scanned the room like I might have misplaced a Picasso. "You're not staff. You're not family. So what are you exactly?" "I'm helping your mother," I said, keeping my tone even. He stepped closer, close enough that I could smell his cologne, something harsh and expensive. "Don't make the mistake of thinking that earns you anything." He left before I could reply. I didn't need to. His message was clear. Later that afternoon, Eleanor asked me to bring her tea in the sunroom. The walls were glass, overlooking a vast garden with winding paths and rose bushes groomed into spirals. She sat on a wicker chair wrapped in her shawl, gazing out as if waiting for something long overdue. "She doesn't like when the roses are pruned too early," Carlos said behind me as I approached the garden doors. He held a pair of shears and a basket of clippings. "Each bloom has its time." I nodded, unsure if he meant the flowers or Eleanor. Inside the sunroom, she sipped her tea and motioned for me to sit across from her. "You're not like them," she said, looking past me. "Like who?" "My children, grandchildren, the people who orbit this house like vultures." I didn't answer. She didn't seem to need one. "I married young," she continued, swirling her spoon slowly, "because that's what women like me did." We smiled, we wore pearls, we stayed quiet. I played the role so well I forgot I was pretending. She turned to me then, her voice suddenly sharp. "Do you like pretending, Miss Carter?" "No," I said truthfully. She smiled. "Good. That's why I asked for you." The words stuck with me for the rest of the day. She'd asked for me, not just anyone, me, and I had no idea why. That night, I wandered the hallway to clear my head. The air was cooler there, tinged with wood polish and the scent of old paper. A flicker of candlelight drew my attention to the study. The door was ajar. I peeked in. Eleanor sat at her desk, writing something with careful strokes. Next to her was a thick envelope sealed with red wax. Before I could move, she looked up. Her gaze didn't startle. It settled, calm and knowing. "You're not sleeping," she said. "Neither are you," I replied. She laughed, a dry, fragile sound. "Come here." I stepped into the study. She slid the envelope toward me, but didn't let go. "Not yet. When the time comes, you'll know." I didn't ask what it was. Some part of me understood that answers would come only when she was ready to give them. The next morning, Lena was waiting in the hallway, arms crossed, tapping her heels against the floor. "You've got everyone fooled," she said. "I haven't fooled anyone." She stepped closer. "Let me guess, you think you're special? That Grandma likes you? Please, she's bored, that's all. You're just a distraction." Her voice carried the bite of someone who expected the world to rearrange itself for her benefit. I didn't respond. I just walked past her. In this house, silence was a form of power. As I turned the corner, Carlos was trimming ivy along the railing. Without looking up, he said, "They don't know how to see past their own reflections." I paused. "Who?" "People born inside the walls of this house," he said. "They think they own the light that shines through the windows." I watched the ivy curl around the wrought iron. I wasn't born here. I didn't belong here. But I wasn't leaving either. The days grew heavier, like the air inside the mansion thickened with things left unsaid. I learned to walk softer, to listen more, to notice when Eleanor's tone shifted half a note. Every conversation was a layer, every glance a test. One afternoon, while searching for a misplaced invoice in the study, I noticed the bottom drawer of the old cherrywood desk wasn't shut properly. It was always locked, I was sure of it. I had tried it my second day there, only to find it sealed tight. But now it was slightly ajar. I hesitated. Curiosity has sharp edges in houses like this, but the drawer was calling me, quiet and steady. Inside, there were several folders and an old leather-bound notebook. I pulled them out carefully. The top folder had receipts, nothing strange. The second, bank documents and estate ledgers. But the third one made my breath stop. My name. Typed neatly at the top of a form, "Personal overview, Miss Carter." Beneath it, notes in Eleanor's handwriting, observations. Quick thinker, trustworthy under pressure, strong instinct. I kept reading, more notes, dates, times. A line that chilled me. She doesn't know yet. I was about to open the notebook when I heard her voice behind me. "Looking for something, dear?" I turned, startled. Eleanor stood in the doorway, a faint smile on her lips, but her eyes unreadable. I was looking for the billing invoice, the one for the greenhouse repairs." She nodded slowly. "And did you find it?" "No," I said, truthfully now. "I can keep looking." She walked in and sat in her chair. "Leave those out." I was going to revisit them anyway. I replaced the folders, slid the drawer shut and stood back uncertain. She watched me, then gestured to the window. "Do you see that tree? The one leaning slightly to the left?" I looked. A tall oak, its trunk bent just enough to seem like it was listening to the wind. Vincent hated that tree, said it spoiled the symmetry of the garden. I refused to cut it. "Some things don't need to be straightened," she met my gaze then. "And some truths don't need to be told all at once." I didn't know what to say. I wasn't even sure if she was still talking about the tree. Later that evening, I sat outside by the fountain, the notebook resting on my lap. I hadn't told her I'd taken it, I should have, but I needed to know what was inside. The pages were brittle, filled with looping cursive. Some entries were mundane, weather, meals, books read, but others shifted in tone, talks of regret, a lost friendship, a mistake that couldn't be undone. One name appeared over and over, M. The entries spanned decades, but they began to cluster around a certain year, 1997, the year I was born. One line stood out, "They told me to forget." That silence would protect everyone, but I hear her cry even now. I closed the notebook and stared into the water. A chill crept down my spine that no breeze could cause. The next morning, Eleanor asked me to accompany her to the greenhouse. "I want to show you something," she said, walking slowly between the rows of orchids and ferns. She stopped at a small wooden box on a shelf. Inside was a tiny plant, barely more than a sprout. "I planted this the week you arrived," she said. "It needs attention, but not too much. It will thrive only if given space." She handed me a small watering can. "Your job now." I looked down at the delicate green stem. It seemed too fragile to survive, like it was never meant to last. That evening, I returned to the study. I wasn't looking for more secrets. I had enough of those to carry. I just wanted to feel the quiet again, the calm that wrapped around those books and paintings like a cocoon. But something had shifted. A new photo sat on the desk. I recognized the woman, Eleanor, younger, smiling beside a man I'd never seen. Dark hair, wide grin. They looked happy, not posed. Underneath the frame, a single line had been etched into a brass plate. "To those we love in silence." I didn't sleep that night. I lay awake, notebook clutched to my chest, mind circling around one impossible question. What did she mean when she wrote, "She doesn't know yet"? And what exactly didn't I know? The invitation came folded in ivory cardstock, slipped under my door just before dusk. In gold ink it read, "Family dinner. Formal attire required. 7 p.m. sharp, no signature, no explanation." I stood staring at it for several minutes. This wasn't part of the routine. Up until now, Eleanor had kept me on the margins, trusted me, yes, but privately. This was different. This was public. When I entered the dining room that night, everything was polished to perfection. The chandelier glowed softly, casting warm halos on the long oak table. Crystal glasses, linen napkins, silver cutlery, all of it meticulous. Carlos passed by with a tray of hors d'oeuvres. His eyes met mine briefly. Something in his expression said, "Be careful." Eleanor sat at the head of the table, wrapped in deep navy silk, pearls resting on her collarbone like they belonged there. Her eyes sparkled when she saw me. "Right on time," she said. Martin was already seated to her right. Lena arrived moments later, clicking in on heels like they were weapons. She took one look at me and smirked. "Oh," she said. "She's dining with us now?" Eleanor didn't flinch. "Yes, Lena, she is." Lena scoffed, flopping into her seat like it insulted her personally. "I wasn't aware we were inviting the help to family dinners." "She's not the help," Eleanor replied, lifting her wineglass. "She's my guest." I sat down in silence. The seat assigned to me was directly across from Martin. He didn't speak. He didn't have to. His disdain rolled off him in waves. The meal began with cold cucumber soup, followed by lamb and roasted vegetables. Conversation, if you could call it that, was brittle. Martin talked about the firm, Lena about her latest designer obsession. Eleanor interjected here and there, but mostly she observed. It wasn't until dessert, poached pears in red wine, that she cleared her throat with intent. "I've been reviewing the estate structure," she said, slicing neatly through the fruit. "It's time I begin simplifying matters." Martin stiffened. "Mother, if this is about the trust, we can arrange another meeting with Graves." "No," she said sharply. "This isn't about Graves. It's about decisions I should have made years ago." Lena rolled her eyes. "Here we go." Eleanor ignored her. She looked directly at me. "Miss Carter has been indispensable to me. Her honesty, her discretion, her loyalty, they remind me of qualities I once valued, before the world told me to prioritize bloodlines and surnames." Martin set down his fork. "You're being dramatic." "No," Eleanor replied, her voice suddenly fierce. "I'm being honest, something this family has forgotten how to do." The room fell into tense silence. Lena laughed, but there was no humor in it. "What is this? Some twisted performance? Are you trying to punish us?" "No," Eleanor said. "I'm trying to protect what matters." Martin leaned forward. "You brought her in here. You gave her keys to this house. Now you're praising her in front of us as if she's earned something. What are you implying?" "I'm not implying anything," Eleanor said. "I'm telling you." Lena's voice pitched higher. "She's nothing. A stranger. Just someone you found to fill time with until your next health scare." The words hung in the air, cruel and heavy. I wanted to leave. Every cell in my body screamed to disappear. But I didn't move. Eleanor turned to me. Her expression softened. "You've shown more decency in 3 weeks than I've seen in 3 decades. Martin stood abruptly. "I'm done. This farce is over." Eleanor didn't stop him. Lena followed in a storm of perfume and indignation. The double doors slammed behind them. I was left alone with Eleanor and the soft clink of silverware on china. She poured more wine into her glass, unbothered by the chaos. "That went better than expected," she said, smiling. "Why did you do that?" I asked quietly. "Because truth rots in the dark," she replied, "and I'm running out of time." We sat there, the last two at a table that wasn't meant to hold so much truth. I didn't know what she meant by running out of time, but I believed her. She reached across the table, her hand brushing mine. "They won't forgive me," she said. "But I've made peace with that." Her voice wavered for the first time since I'd met her. "They expect the inheritance," she whispered, "but they forget what real inheritance is." I looked at her then, not as an employer, but as a woman who had lived too long under the weight of her own silence. She didn't look away, and in that moment I knew the storm had only just begun. After the dinner, everything shifted. Not overtly, not all at once, but like a floorboard settling, subtly and irreversibly. The air in the mansion grew heavier. Every glance carried weight. Every silence stretched longer. Eleanor became more deliberate with her requests. Tasks weren't just errands now, they were puzzles. She handed me envelopes with no return address and asked me to mail them at odd hours. She asked me to organize her will, but only the draft version, never the final one. She had me transcribe letters with no recipients, letters filled with phrases like, "You were always more mine than they ever knew." One morning she brought me a locked wooden box. "This belonged to my mother," she said, placing it on the table between us. "It holds nothing of value, at least not in the way Martin understands value. Keep it, but don't open it until I say." I nodded, placing the box carefully in the bottom drawer of the desk in my room. I didn't ask questions. I'd learned that asking often meant the truth would recoil and disappear. The days began blending. Mornings in the greenhouse, afternoons with legal documents, evenings reading to Eleanor aloud from books she never seemed to follow, but insisted on hearing. Her health flickered, some days sharp, commanding, others pale, weak, as if her body had forgotten how to anchor her spirit. Mr. Graves began visiting more often, always at the same time, always dressed in quiet greys. He greeted me with a polite nod, watched me more than he spoke to me. Once he pulled me aside near the foyer. "You're aware of her condition?" he asked. "She doesn't speak of it," I replied. He nodded slowly. "She has less time than she's telling you." I felt something tighten in my chest. "Why are you telling me?" "Because she told me to." He handed me a sealed envelope. "If anything happens unexpectedly, only open this if it does." He left before I could ask anything else. That night, Eleanor summoned me to the parlor. The fireplace was lit, casting flickers across her face. "I want you to find the black ledger in the library," she said. "Top shelf, third row." I found it, thick, dusty, filled with lists, names, dates, transactions. Some pages were marked. One page had a red circle around the name Verity Carter, my last name, but not my first. I brought the book back, heart pounding. Eleanor glanced at the page but didn't explain. "I want you to study it. Understand who trusted whom, who betrayed whom." I didn't sleep that night. The name on the ledger wouldn't leave me alone. It was too specific, too intentional. The next morning she sent me to town for a tea blend that didn't exist. I searched every store. When I returned empty-handed, she only smiled. "It was a test," she said. "You didn't pretend to find it. That matters." Later that day, I passed Martin in the hallway. "She's grooming you for something," he said, voice low. "Don't let it get to your head." "I don't want anything," I said. He laughed, bitter and short. "That's what makes you dangerous." The following week, Eleanor collapsed in the greenhouse. I found her slumped beside the orchids, breathing shallowly. Her skin was cold, lips pale. I called for help, shouted until Carlos and Lena came running. Carlos carried her inside. I stayed at her side until the ambulance arrived, holding her hand, whispering her name like it could anchor her. At the hospital, the doctor told me she'd had a cardiac episode. Her heart was fragile, too fragile to withstand more shocks. Lena was furious. "What were you doing?" she snapped. "You were supposed to be watching her." "I was," I said. "Then how did this happen?" "She didn't want to rest," I replied. "She insisted on watering the orchids herself." Lena scoffed. "She's old. You should have stopped her." "I don't control her," I said. "Clearly," she muttered, storming off. That night, Eleanor woke in her hospital bed and reached for me. "You stayed," she whispered. "Of course I did." She nodded. Then it settled. I didn't know what she meant, but she closed her eyes again, peaceful this time. Back at the estate, the house felt colder, quieter, but not empty. There was something alive in its stillness now, something watching how I moved through it. Carlos caught me lingering in the study. "She trusts you more than anyone," he said. "Why?" "Because you didn't ask to be trusted," he replied. "You just were." I thought of the box in my drawer, the envelope from Graves, the ledger. Nothing made sense, and yet everything felt like it was leading towards something I couldn't see yet, but soon would. Eleanor returned home a few days later, thinner, quieter, but with eyes that still saw more than they revealed. The doctors had warned her to rest. She ignored them. Her mind, if not her body, was still in command. I resumed my duties, but something had changed. She didn't just give me tasks now. She shared pieces, small pieces, memories disguised as instructions, phrases that lingered too long to be casual. "Don't trust the ones who knock too loudly. Some secrets need their own rooms." Then one morning, Carlos met me in the hallway. "She's preparing you," he said. "For what?" He hesitated, then gestured toward the east wing. Have you ever heard her mention Verity? The name hit me like a pulse. I nodded. In the ledger. Why? Carlos looked around before speaking again. That was her sister. Disappeared in '76. No one talks about her. Disappeared? Some say she ran. Others say she was sent away. Eleanor never confirmed anything, but she mourned her in her way. I thought about the notebook, the letter fragments, the way Eleanor stared out the window some nights, like she was counting stars she'd lost. That evening I searched the hallway again, not for anything specific, just to follow the pull I couldn't ignore. I found myself near the end of the west wing, where the wallpaper peeled slightly at the corners and the floorboards whispered underfoot. There, behind a low bookcase, I noticed a draft. I pulled the shelf back slowly. Behind it, a narrow door. It creaked open to reveal a small room, barely larger than a closet. Inside, a single wooden chair, a tiny window, and on the wall dozens of pinned pages. Letters, photographs, all yellowed with time. At the center of the collage was a birth certificate. Verity Carter, born 1950. I stepped closer. Something in me broke open. One photograph showed a girl in her 20s standing in front of the same greenhouse Eleanor now tended. Her face was softer, gentler, but undeniably familiar. My features mirrored hers. I touched the photo, breath shallow. In the corner of the room, a stack of boxes. I opened the top one. Diaries, letters, one envelope addressed simply, "To the one who looks like me." I opened it with shaking fingers. If you're reading this, then maybe you've found the room. Maybe you've started to understand. My name was Verity. I was Eleanor's sister, and if what I fear came true, I am also your mother. I dropped the letter. The room spun. I sat down hard on the chair, the only stable thing in that space full of ghosts. I wasn't supposed to keep you, the letter continued. They told me it would ruin everything, that Eleanor had too much to lose. She convinced them to let you live, but not with me. I was sent away, and then I vanished. I wanted to find you, but I didn't know how. I hope she did. I read it twice, then a third time. My whole life unraveled in those lines. No wonder Eleanor had called me familiar. No wonder she'd watched me like I was a secret returned. She hadn't just chosen me. She'd known who I was. I left the room quietly, heart pounding. I didn't sleep that night. Instead, I lay awake, staring at the ceiling, asking questions I had no answers for. The next morning, Eleanor was in the sunroom, sipping tea as though nothing had shifted. "You found it, didn't you?" she asked, not looking up. I sat across from her, silent. She nodded. She was fire and music, and they couldn't handle that. "You knew," I whispered. "You knew all along." Her eyes, wet now, met mine. "I begged them not to take you from her, but they said she was unstable, that you needed safety, so they found a way to erase her. And me? They told me never to speak of it, but I watched you grow, from afar. When I finally met you in person, I knew it had to be you. Why didn't you tell me?" "Because the truth has gravity. It pulls everything else down." I stood to leave, but she reached for my hand. "She loved you, I never doubted that. And I failed her. This is my way of restoring what I can." I didn't speak. Couldn't. But as I walked out of that room, I realized I was no longer a guest in the mansion. I was part of its story now, and it had only just begun telling mine. The days that followed blurred, each one trailing the weight of what I now knew. The secret Eleanor had protected wasn't a footnote in her life. It was the axis around which everything turned. She grew weaker, her steps slower, her voice sometimes distant. But her clarity never wavered. If anything, she became more precise. She summoned me each morning to sit with her in the sunroom or the library. Sometimes we spoke. Sometimes she asked me to read. Once she handed me a small velvet pouch. "Inside is a key," she said. "Keep it close. When the time comes, you'll need it." "What does it open?" I asked. "You'll know." That was all. Her family stopped pretending. Martin became colder, sharper. He watched me like a hawk. Lena avoided eye contact altogether. The air between us carried a static charge, like something just waiting for a spark. I began noticing them watching Eleanor too, not with affection or concern, but calculation, as if they were counting her breaths, waiting for silence. Then, one afternoon, the call came from her nurse. "She's asking for you." I rushed upstairs past the polished banisters and faded portraits and found her in bed, propped against pillows, skin translucent as porcelain, but her eyes still held fire. She reached for my hand. "Do you have the key?" "Yes." "Good," she said, her voice gravel and breath. "Then we're almost there." She closed her eyes and drifted into sleep. That night I stayed in the hallway outside her door. I couldn't sleep, couldn't even sit still. I walked the corridors again, this time not looking for secrets, but holding one too vast to carry alone. Carlos found me before sunrise. "She asked for you again." I followed him back upstairs. This time she was awake, barely. "I've made arrangements," she whispered. "Graves will come in the morning." "You'll be there?" "What arrangements?" "You'll see." I sat beside her, holding her hand until her grip went slack. Eleanor Whitmore died just after 7. The house fell still. There was no announcement, no wailing, just silence. A silence that moved through every hall like smoke, slow and suffocating. Martin appeared at the top of the stairs, face pale, jaw clenched. "She's gone," I said. He nodded once, tight and controlled. "Then we'll proceed." "With what?" He didn't say. By noon, Mr. Graves arrived, briefcase in hand. His demeanor was even more reserved than usual. He greeted no one, but nodded at me before locking himself in Eleanor's study. Lena cried in her room for an hour, loud and dramatic, but not once came down to see her grandmother's body. Carlos placed white lilies on Eleanor's bedside table. He didn't speak, but his hands trembled. That evening, Graves called us to the drawing room. "The final version of Mrs. Whitmore's will is sealed," he said. "In accordance with her request, the reading will occur tomorrow morning. All direct descendants and those named by her must attend." Martin looked at me, eyes narrowed. "You won't be needed," Graves interjected smoothly. "Actually, she is required to be present. Her name is in the opening paragraph." The room went silent. Lena scoffed. "You've got to be kidding." "She's not," Graves replied. "And if you wish to hear what Eleanor had to say, truly hear, you'll be there." Martin didn't argue, but his stare lingered like a warning. That night I returned to my room and opened the velvet pouch again. The key gleamed gold under the lamplight. I turned it over in my hand, wondering what locks still lay between me and the full truth. I thought of Verity, of that secret room, of the letter that still sat folded in my drawer. I thought of the box Eleanor gave me and hadn't told me to open. And I thought of her voice, calm, resolute, saying, "They expect the inheritance, but they forget what real inheritance is." I didn't sleep. At dawn, I dressed carefully, not out of vanity, but instinct. Whatever happened in that room, I needed to be steady. The mansion was still when I walked down the hall, still but not peaceful, as if the walls themselves were holding breath. Carlos stood by the front door, silent, solemn. "You ready?" he asked. I nodded. As I entered the drawing room, Lena looked up from her phone with theatrical annoyance. Martin, already seated, didn't acknowledge me. Graves stood near the fireplace, papers in hand. "I will now begin the formal reading of the last will and testament of Eleanor Whitmore," he announced. I sat, heart thudding in my chest, and when Graves looked down at the first page, adjusted his glasses and began to speak. I heard him say my name first. My name echoed through the drawing room before Graves even finished the sentence. I didn't look at Martin or Lena. I couldn't. "Eleanor Margaret Whitmore," Graves continued, "being of sound mind and under no external influence, declares this as her final testament." He cleared his throat. "To Miss Carter, first and foremost, I bequeath 80% of my entire estate, including but not limited to the main residence, all personal holdings, assets, and the trust currently residing under Whitmore Foundation Reserve." Lena gasped. "What?" Graves kept reading. "I further request that Miss Carter be granted full administrative authority overall philanthropic distributions for the next 10 years, in line with the values discussed in our private sessions. Martin stood. This is absurd. Please remain seated, Graves said evenly. As stated in the document, any interruption will be considered a waiver of your hearing rights. Martin sat, jaw tight. His knuckles whitened against the chair arms. To Martin Whitmore and Lena Whitmore, Graves continued, I leave the remaining 20% to be split evenly with no voting rights in the management of the estate. Lena's voice rose, brittle and sharp. You mean she gave her everything? To her? Graves did not respond. He opened another envelope, carefully extracting a letter. There is an addendum handwritten by Mrs. Whitmore to be read aloud. He adjusted his glasses, then began. If you are hearing this, then I am gone, and you are shocked, not because I kept secrets, but because for once I did not share them with you. I have spent my life being controlled by the expectations of others, my family, my legacy, the weight of a name. This decision is not about revenge. It is about justice. It is about truth. I loved Verity more than anyone ever allowed me to admit. I failed her when it mattered most, but I have tried in my final years to correct that failure. Miss Carter is not just my assistant. She is my blood, my responsibility, and my atonement. She carries in her eyes the truth I buried. In her hands, she holds the courage I never had. And so I give her what was always hers in spirit. I ask you not to understand this, but to respect it. And if you cannot, then walk away quietly. You've done it before. The silence after the letter was heavier than anything I'd ever known. Martin stared at me like I'd stolen breath from his lungs. Lena stood and left the room, heels clicking against the hardwood like gunfire. Graves looked up, folding the paper slowly. There are, of course, legal recordings and documentation supporting Mrs. Whitmore's decision. A DNA test was conducted 6 months ago, under her request, confirming parentage connections. Martin spoke through clenched teeth. You're telling me that this stranger is actually a Whitmore? Graves turned to him. I am telling you that your mother made this decision fully aware of its implications, and that the law will uphold it. Martin didn't respond. He didn't have to. The fury in his eyes said enough. After the reading, Graves pulled me aside. There's more you need to see, he said. She left instructions and documents. She wanted you to have full access to her private files, including the sealed records from the adoption court. I wasn't adopted, I said. I was hidden. He nodded. Yes, that's exactly what she believed, and she left proof. We stepped into the study, where a thick file sat on the desk, bound in black leather. Inside, letters from Verity, transcripts of legal arrangements made through backdoor intermediaries, and one document signed by Eleanor herself, transferring guardianship in secret. My hands shook as I turned the pages. She built the trust in your name years ago, Graves added. She waited for the moment you'd be ready, I whispered. I didn't know I was being prepared. She did. Outside, the hallway was quiet. I opened the door and stepped into the silence. Carlos was waiting near the window. He didn't speak, just nodded once. She told me this day would come, he said finally. Said it would break things. But also that it might heal something too. I don't know what to do now, I admitted. You will, he said. But be careful. This house, this family, they don't lose quietly. And he was right. Before the day ended, I saw the first cracks form. Lena whispering to a lawyer on the phone. Martin walking into Eleanor's private office uninvited. The storm wasn't over. It had just changed shape. The next morning, a legal notice arrived. Delivered by hand, crisp and impersonal. Martin was contesting the will. I read the letter twice. The language was cold, clinical. Undue influence, cognitive decline, circumstantial favoritism. It didn't mention my name, not directly, just the decedent's recent companion. I sat at the kitchen table, the letter trembling in my hands. It hadn't even been 24 hours since the reading. Carlos appeared in the doorway, holding a folded note. She left more, he said simply. I opened it. Inside were 3 lines in Eleanor's handwriting. Don't fight them. Don't fear them. Just stand. I slipped it into my pocket and stood. The house felt different now. Rooms I used to walk through freely were locked. People whispered when I passed. The staff, those who remained, looked at me with uncertainty, unsure who I was anymore. That evening, I returned to the greenhouse. The small sprout Eleanor had given me to tend was growing. Its leaves had doubled in size. I knelt beside it, touched the soil, still damp, still alive. Behind me, Carlos spoke. They'll try everything now. I know. You can't afford to flinch. I'm not sure I know how to fight the way they do. You don't need to, he said. Eleanor didn't choose you to play their game. She chose you to change it. The next day, I found a surveillance camera in my hallway. Newly installed, its light blinking like a threat. Then came the letters, anonymous, cruel. You don't belong. She used you. Leave while you still can. I didn't respond. But I started locking my door at night. Graves called with updates. The hearing would take weeks. Martin had assembled a team of attorneys. Lena had joined the petition. They're trying to frame you as a manipulator, Graves warned, that you wormed your way into Eleanor's trust. I laughed, tired, not amused. Do they even hear themselves? He sighed. They're desperate. Wealth breeds entitlement, and entitlement fears loss. I spent hours each day reviewing documents, learning the intricacies of the estate. Eleanor's instructions had been thorough. She left blueprints for every decision, justification for every transfer. I wasn't just her heir. I was her executor in spirit. Still, fear crept in. I began noticing cars parked outside too long, phone calls with no one on the other end, footsteps outside my window at night. Carlos stayed nearby, his presence quiet but constant. I can't protect you from everything, he told me once. I don't expect you to, but I'll be here because she asked me to be. One afternoon, he handed me a second envelope. She gave this to me. Said to wait until they started circling. Inside were 5 more letters, one for the judge, one for Graves, one for Martin, one for Lena, and one for me. I opened mine last. You're stronger than you know. I saw it the moment you looked me in the eye without asking for anything. I knew then that you weren't just Verity's daughter. You were your own force. Don't let them turn you into a ghost like they did her. Speak, stand, breathe fire if you have to. I cried for the first time since she died. The next morning, I found the box she'd once given me, the one I was never told to open. The velvet pouch key fit perfectly. Inside were photographs, letters, a locket with 2 names engraved inside, Verity and Eleanor. At the bottom, a deed. The land behind the estate, the orchard and stream, had been transferred to my name 2 years before she died. In it, a clause, to be preserved, to build something new, not inherited. I walked out into the garden that evening. The roses had begun to wither, but the air still smelled like memory. Lena passed me near the fountain. She didn't speak, just glared, eyes hard. I didn't steal anything, I said. She stopped. You think it matters? You're a reminder of everything she chose to hide, of everything we weren't. Maybe that's the point. She left without another word. Later, I stood at Eleanor's bedroom window, looking out over the grounds. They would keep fighting, maybe for months, maybe longer. But I wasn't running. I wasn't hiding. And for the first time in my life, I felt the shape of my own name, mine, not borrowed, not assigned. Carter. And whatever came next, I would answer to it fully. Spring returned quietly that year. The first buds in the garden opened like slow secrets, the air turning warmer, gentler. I watched the change from Eleanor's bedroom window, my bedroom now, though I still hadn't moved in. The estate remained under legal scrutiny, but the judge had already denied the injunction. Graves said it was only a matter of time now. The truth had structure, evidence, history, and heart. And Martin's case, however loud, had none of that. One morning, I went to the orchard behind the house, the land she'd deeded to me long before she said my name aloud. I sat beneath the cherry tree and read through Verity's letters again. Some were addressed to no one, some to me, some to Eleanor. There was one, dated a month before my birth. I don't know where they'll send her. I don't know who she'll grow up to be. But I hope, oh God, I hope she finds her way back to the roots they tried to cut. I hope she forgives me for not being the one to raise her. I folded the letter, pressed it to my chest and wept softly. For her, for Eleanor, for the versions of myself I had to leave behind to become who I was now. Later, I met with Carlos near the old gardener's shed. I told him my plan. I want to use the orchard, I said, not for money, for something real. He listened, as he always had. There are kids, I continued, like I was. Foster homes, lost names, no one telling them they matter. He nodded. Then give them that. Within weeks, I began the process of converting the estate's orchard grounds into a retreat, a home for those left behind. Not an institution, a beginning. I called it Verity House. Graves handled the paperwork. The trust funded it. The walls were painted soft colors. The beds were real wood. And no child who came through would ever have to ask twice if they belonged. The day the gates opened, I stood beside the archway and whispered a promise into the wind. You'll never be forgotten. Not you, Verity. Not Eleanor. Not anyone who dared to love in silence. Martin never returned to the estate. He settled in the city, bitter and far away. Lena tried once to speak with me, her tone clipped, uncertain. She asked if she could visit the garden. I told her yes, and meant it. Pain doesn't dissolve, but sometimes it transforms. One evening, I walked through the house alone. The furniture hadn't changed. The portraits still lined the walls. But the house felt different, lighter. As if it had finally exhaled, I paused at the staircase where Eleanor once stood in silence, watching everything from above. I hope I did right by you, I whispered. And in my heart, I heard her answer. You already did. You came back. Weeks later, a young girl arrived at Verity House. Quiet, withdrawn. She didn't speak for the first 3 days. Then one morning she found me watering the greenhouse, the same one Eleanor had loved. She walked over, touched a sprout gently and said, "Does this one have a name?" I smiled. "Not yet. Want to give it one?" She thought for a moment. "Brave." That night, I sat at the fountain, same as I had on my first week here. I looked up at the stars. I wasn't helping out anymore. I was home. I finally understood why Eleanor had said those words, just helping out. She meant it the way only someone burdened by legacy could. It was her way of easing me in gently. Her way of saying, this might start small, but it will become everything. And she was right. If this story moved you even half as much as it moved me to live it, don't forget to subscribe right now. Stories like this are just the beginning. We have so many more to share. And if you're ready for another powerful story that'll leave you breathless, click the video that's appearing right now on your screen. Trust me, it's one you don't want to miss.